All right, Scott, the $1 million question. What would be an A-plus draft for the Ottawa Senators?
Honestly, I'm of the view, the more I've thought about this class, that sort of top group that everybody talks about, the players who are likely to be available at 7, the more I come back to the same two kids, and that's Zeev Buium and Zane Parekh. Zeev's obviously a lefty, and they've got things to figure out in terms of the lefties and Shabbat and Chikrin, and they're going to have to decide who's going to be a part of the puzzle long term. We know that Jake's going to be there. But Zeev is he checks a lot of boxes. Increasingly, I think he might be there. I thought there was a chance coming out of the Frozen Four that Zeev might be a sort of top 5 guy. But just after spending some time asking around in terms of who he met with at the Combine, the teams he met with a second time at the Combine, Zeev didn't have a dinner at the Combine, which is sometimes telling of that sort of top 5, top 6 range. My scout survey, I just finished it, released on Monday at The Athletic. The question in the survey this year was asked about 20 scouts, sort of the group of the top 6D, who's the one you like the best and who's the one you like the least and why. And Zeev was an interesting one in that he was the only player amongst the group of sort of 6 top D in this draft who wasn't given a single vote as the best and wasn't given a single vote as the least, which sort of speaks to exactly that range where the Sens are, where everybody clearly respects him as a player. Everybody likes Zeev as a player. Everybody's high on Zeev as a player. I've got a feature coming out on him at The Athletic that will sort of really get into the incredible season he had. One of the best draft eligible seasons ever by a defenseman in college hockey history. And I think he could be there. So if they're comfortable taking a lefty, I think Zeev might be the guy for me there. He's 4th on my board. I think getting him at 7 would be a sort of a real boon, if you will. And then Zane, I think, just makes a lot of sense for that sort of high end offense. He's a righty, and I was just in Saginaw for the Mem Cup, and he just sees it at a completely different level. Like just the little offensive plays, identifying guys that he needs to get pucks to before the puck even lands on his stick. Like I think you're talking about a potentially special player. And Parekh was a player who appeared multiple times at number 1, which actually surprised me. I thought it was going to be the Levshunov and Salayev show, if you will, for the top of that poll that I sent out to NHL scouts. And Parekh got, I think it was 3 or 4 votes as the best D in this draft, which speaks to the belief that some have in the star power there offensively. So those two guys feel like they're 4 and 5 on my list, and they're probably going to be the best players available when they pick. And I think there's a fit with either one of them, even with Zeev being a lefty.
Now, something you referenced with both those guys is they had extended seasons. How much has that either helped Buium and Parekh or hurt a guy like Lev Shunov who hasn't played since like early March?
Well, it certainly helped Buium. I think it helped Zane too. I think people wanted to see Zane because of some of the questions about his defense and his competitiveness and sort of how lackadaisical he can look at times. People wanted to see him in a high stakes, high pressure environment. So him playing all the way until the last game of hockey that was played this year at any level was the Memorial Cup final, right? So all eyes were on him. There was no other live hockey for teams to be watching. Men's Worlds were already done. So that piece of it was, I think, important for both of them. Zeev's case, like he played his best hockey of the year in the Frozen Four. Like he was absolutely unbelievable, and not just unbelievable offensively in terms of taking over games, but locking guys up defensively. I think that really sort of solidified him as one of the true top D prospects in this draft. I know David Carl, who's going to be quoted in my Zeev Buium story, the head coach, obviously at Denver, believes he's the most impactful player in this draft, regardless of position. And I trust that that's not just him pumping his own guys' tires. But yeah, no, it hurts. It hurts some of the other guys. That last impression can matter. It's been a long time since people have seen Levshunov play. Now, Levshunov is meeting as we speak, or as this is aired at least. Is meeting with people again at Gold Star's Combine in Fort Lauderdale. Gold Star's welcoming all of those Russian kids, and he's a Gold Star client. So he's going to be on the ice there, and teams are going to see him again and get another chance to talk to him, and that never hurts. But yeah, guys like Lev Shunov that haven't been playing for a while, it's a factor, and it helped Dickinson too, to that same your same point there. Dickinson played in the last game of the season as well in the Memorial Cup final against Perek, and Dickinson was the best player on the ice in the second half of that game. Now London lost that game, but Dickinson created 2 of their goals and was dominant, especially in the second half of that game. So those things matter. These lists aren't set 2 months ago; they're set in the final days of the process.
I want your take on kind of where the tiers are and where the fall offs are, maybe in the first round, but I almost want to do it Olympic scoring. Like there's always, it feels like one outlier so high, one outlier below, and then you can kind of find the meat in the middle. But how hard was it for you with this draft class to narrow it down in the tiers in the first round?
I was on a Calgary radio station there a couple of days ago, and they were kind of asking the same thing. They're picking at 9, obviously, and they're like, where's the fall off, right? Like, is it? And honestly, obviously, we know what 1 is. The draft starts at pick 2, and I think that shelf runs from like 2 to 10. Yeah. Like, legitimately, you could make an argument. Maybe not a super strong argument for some of those guys down at 9 or 10, but you could. Like, if Sam Dickinson went 2. I wouldn't be shocked. Like, that wouldn't be crazy. So I think that, like, legitimately it's that, that top pick. And then we're looking at 2 to 10. And then you kind of get into that mushy, 11 to 17 maybe is the next tier. But it's always, it's so based on personal preferences of players, like we know Corey Pronman loves Carter Yakimchuk and has him at number 3. And, like, I'm just not ready to bite on him that high. Whereas I love Caden Lindstrom and he thinks he's probably more appropriate at 9 or 10 or 11. Right. So it's going to vary between who likes who and where, for sure.
Now, one of the reasons we love the draft so much for people that get really invested in it is the drama that goes on the day of. You can have your list, you can check it twice, and you can think you've talked to all the scouts, you know what's going to happen, but all it takes is one wild card and the whole thing is totally crazy. Cam, which team or maybe even what range of the draft do you think things could go off the wheels here based on consensus lists?
I always kind of look at the Ducks, that they play by their own game. Like they, that we saw them take Carlson ahead of Fantilli, which wasn't crazy, but like, the vast majority of people preferred Fantilli. They went Carlson, they went Mason McTavish earlier than almost anybody except for myself had him ranked. So I'm picking up what Pat Verbeek and that crew is putting down. We heard a lot of rumblings that they took a long look at Matvey Mishkov last year at 2 too. But I think that he kind of indicated that he wasn't really interested in going to Anaheim. Who wouldn't want to play in Anaheim though?
Dadonov, we know that. We actually know that far too well.
Touche. Yes, yeah. But I can use a tan. Like, get me in there. That sounds all right to me. Yeah. But especially if you're coming out of Russia. But no, I look at the Ducks. I'm really curious to see what Columbus does with Donnie Waddell there, and they've got some super smart cats in that organization. Like, I can't say enough good things about Cam Lawrence. Josh Weisberg. They've got really smart guys there too. So they again will do what they think is best, right? Like they took Denton Matejchuk much earlier than everybody thought they would a couple of years ago too. So there's gonna be some people that step up, I think, and maybe shift the boat a little, rock the boat a little bit and kind of mess with everyone's list, as we see every year, which is, like you said, Renan, it's half the fun is when somebody goes, yeah, right. Kotkaniemi goes 3 and everyone, ooh, right. Yeah. So it's, I'm hoping we get some of that too. Davidoff's the guy to watch, right? Like if he goes 2, everyone will be like, yeah, he went 2. And if he's still sitting there at like 6, everyone's gonna be like, how far is he going to slide?
Yeah. And another wild card for us is Steve Staios, an entirely new regime in Ottawa. And we know drafting's been a huge sore spot, especially in recent years, not even having a first round pick in back-to-back seasons. We know they're going to miss one of their next 2. Before we get into this mock draft, I just want to ask you about Steve Staios just in hockey circles, because it's steady Stevie Staios, but some fans calling him sleepy now, saying, hey, you've been here a year. All you've done is put Tarasenko to a spot he wanted to go, probably for a little undervalue, and you bring in a waiver attempt with Boris Kachuk. We don't know what he wants to build in a team, but as a guy who's been covering leagues that he's been in junior for the last number of years, what's either the reputation or the style of Steve Staios?
Well, we know he's got the blackberries coming in, so he's tech savvy, right? Like that's exciting.
Simmer's the best, man.
That was great. So I mean, I kind of think about Brian Burke a little bit when I look at a new GM that has a long leash, clearly, right? When they get freshly hired, and it's someone who comes with a strong background and coming up the ranks a little bit, is that there shouldn't be much pressure to just like start ripping band-aids off and moving pieces for that first year. And I always respected that with Brian Burke, is that he saved his big move for the end of his first season or the beginning of his second, right? Drafting Chris Pronger, doing all the Sedin twin stuff. Like he picks his spot going to get Scotty Niedermayer in Anaheim. Like he has some big plays. And so I expect that Staios is going to be active here, whether it's at the draft, free agency, in trades, or it's something early on next season. That because eventually it's like you got to shit or get off the pot, right? Like you got to make some moves, you got to make the team better, you got to fix the goaltending, you got to do something, right? So I would imagine that who's to say if that pick's in play. I think that that's probably some teams are calling about number 7 there to see if it's available, because it would make some sense maybe to move that for a more impactful younger player. And there's some teams that are probably interested in doing something like that. Like, is Carolina open to moving Nakash? That's something that includes that 7th overall pick. I mean, I'm not Eric Tulsky. He's smarter than I am, but they might be open to something like that too. So I think Staios, I won't call him sleepy, but I think he's biding his time. And now, in the next couple of months here, though, or even weeks, we can start to hopefully see a path that he's going to start to chart.
Jerome, how's the scouting season been for you?
It's been a good one, challenging one as well. Not an easy draft to scout this year. So it's been our meetings have been pretty entertaining when we're doing our rankings, but we're good. Like, we're happy with the book out, and we can enjoy life a bit more now.
Yeah, definitely. Especially once the draft is over, I'm sure you can take a big exhale and a sigh of relief and take a bit of a break there. But you guys put a lot of work into the Black Book. Ross and I have been going through it here. What's been the kind of, I don't know how to word this, but like the defining pattern of this draft? Like, you see some years where it's a lot of high-end talent in the top 10 and then it falls off, or there's a lot of centermen available. I'm kind of getting the sense from this draft that this is going to be the draft of defensemen, especially in the first round. But what's your sense of the overall vibe of this draft?
Well, I agree. I think the top of the draft is very defenseman heavy. It does drop a bit after that. There's some interesting guys like Jiricek, Solberg, other guys like that. But I think if I want to I will compare the draft to last year. So honestly it's the exact opposite of last year. Last year was really strong at the top. This year, not as much. But last year's draft didn't really have much of a depth. There was no, like, I know some teams were running out of players by round 6. So a lot of the teams lists were kind of like similar, which is rare. Like, it doesn't really happen often. Usually teams have total different lists. And like, some teams were running out of players in round 6, round 7. So I don't think it's going to be the case this year. I think the depth of the draft this year is pretty good. So good chance you can get some, pretty decent player in round 4 or round 5. So so I would say that's the big difference between last year and this year's draft.
Where's the first big cliff in terms of tier for you? Is it the bigger gap from 1 to 2? Is Macklin Celebrini that far separated from everybody else, or is there a cluster behind him and then a big drop off? Where does it fall for you?
There's definitely a cliff after Celebrini. Like we watched Celebrini this year, but we didn't really have to be honest. Like he was great last year and he was great this year. Nothing really changed. Like he's awesome. He's like he's almost like the perfect player, honestly. Like, there's no weakness in his game. Like, it's almost Sidney Crosby like, but not as good as Crosby, don't get me wrong, but like his mindset, the way he thinks the game, the way he competes, it's just very almost Crosby like. And then after that, from 2 to 10, it's all over the map. You can see all the different lists. Like no one has the same list, basically. And then after that top 10, there's another cliff that very challenging ranking. I would say 11 to 15, 16 on our list. It was very like a lot of debate going on in our meetings. So yeah, I would say that would be my answer to your question.
Which team do you think has the most exciting draft potential? And you don't have to say the Senators. I know this is Locked On Senators, so you don't have to say that. But which team are you looking at this draft and you're like, wow, they could really make some franchise-altering moves here, or they could cause some drama with a trade or a surprise pick or something like that? Is there one team you're kind of zeroing in on for some drama?
That's a good question.
Good question,
I would say... I would say, well, I mean, there's been talk about New Jersey maybe moving their picks at 10, Buffalo at 11. So I think that would be the case. It's really hard to answer because it's really hard to really mock this draft. Like I sent you guys my mock draft, and I'm like, this is really hard to do. It's really hard to. I guess the easy answer would be San Jose. They have the first pick, and they have, I believe, the 14th pick. Yeah. So, like technically, they're gonna get 2 players from their top 10. Like there's a good chance that the player they pick at 14 might be in their top 10. So, you get out of the draft. You have 2 top 10 player. I think you're quite happy with that.
Yep. There's some teams that traded out from late 20s, Winnipeg to Montreal at the deadline, and a few others. Are those teams going to be regretting it? Do you think we're going to see a couple gems in the late first round, or how do you feel like the end of the first, obviously with the Sens having 25th, I'm asking for a specific reason. How good of a player are they going to get there?
I think you can get a good player at 25 or like the last third of the first round. I think like I said, there's some good depth in this draft. Some interesting players that could go in the 20s that maybe in 3-4 years we'll look back and like, whoa, like almost I don't want to say Wyatt Johnson because that's really easy, but like one interesting thing about this draft, like the players in this draft are very young. If you look at the month they're born, a lot of them are born in June, July, August, September, and that makes the projection very interesting because they have a lot of room to grow still, and so that makes the projection of us scout very difficult. So I think we're gonna have a lot of surprise in a few years where we have guys rank, and that ranking might not look as good in a few years, I think.
Brock, welcome back to the show. How are you doing, my man?
Thanks, guys. Psyched to be back. Doing great. How you guys doing?
We're fantastic. 7-25, 39 in there too. It's a good place to be for a team that really needs to reload the prospect pipeline. You think they're going to get like 2-3 pieces that would be, I saw you just did your prospect team rankings. Like how high do you think the 39th pick could be in the Sens pool? Is that like challenging to be the top dog or 1, 2, 3? Where are we at with that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, where the Sens are picking, it's obviously going to improve their standing in an organizational ranking like that, right? Obviously, the big dog is going to be San Jose with, them having Celebrini, them having another pick. That's going to move them up significantly. But when you've got Ottawa picking at 7, you got them picking at 25, you've got them picking again the second. That's going to be really great for this organization, like you said. And even in that pick in the second round, yeah, they could fall into that sort of top 10 of the organization, depending on obviously who they select. When you're picking in that range, sometimes teams do take, we'll say, guys that are more like projects, right? And that could obviously be a guy who probably slots down a little bit further in your organization right now because he's so far away, right? But ultimately, you'd like to think that 7 and 25 are going to be fairly polished guys, especially in this draft class.
And as we're pulling it up here, you're watching on YouTube, they do great work over at McKeen's. You can go check out all the information behind this ranking. But in the Ottawa Senators prospect pool, 1 through 10. You can see it. This is YouTube exclusive, Pillsy, so we don't have to worry about rolling through for the audio guys. So you think we're looking at adding 1, 2, or 3 on the left column here as far as 39 based on the depth of talent you see in this draft?
Yeah, I think that maybe not 1, 2, 3. I think you're looking at 1, 2 for sure, depending on who they grab at 25. Then I think 39. Like I like this Ottawa group, right? Like even a guy like Angus Cruikshank at 5. I know you guys are big fans of his. I see you tweeting about him a lot, and he's somebody who I think can be sort of a consistent 20 goal guy for the Senators in the future. And there's no guarantee that guy at 39 is going to be able to do that. Stephen Holiday had a really good showing in that little cup of tea in the AHL after Ohio State was done and after he signed, right? So he looks like a good prospect for the Senators, and he's somebody that we've been high on at McKean's previously. So I think that group has some really underrated prospects who have a chance to be not significant players for Ottawa. We're not talking about play drivers. We're not talking about first-line players, but we're looking at sandwich guys, glue guys who have a chance to be longtime Ottawa players and contributors.
Now, do you think the Sens should attack we'll stick with just the first round here, based on how their first pick goes? They should have a certain strategy for the second pick, or for you, Brock, is it just doesn't matter what position, what type of player, just take best player available regardless of who you've just selected previously?
Yeah, I think I would use organizational need as sort of like a tiebreaker. If you've got a player who you think is clearly that best player, it doesn't matter what position they play, because your organization is going to look a lot different 3-4 years down the road when that player is ready to make an impact, right? So it's a dangerous and slippery slope if you're selecting just based on organizational need. Now, if you've got 2 guys who your scouts are completely divided on, the room is completely divided on, then I think that's when you start to weigh things like, okay, we really could use somebody to play on our right side in our top 4, right? That's where you start to think about those things. But otherwise, I think you really try to, especially in the first round, you really try to find the player that you think is going to make the largest impact, especially for a team like Ottawa, right? Where we're not talking about one of the absolute elite systems in the NHL, right? So you're looking at just trying to add impact players.
And 1 or 2 options available to them at 7th overall have torn up the Ontario Hockey League as defensemen. Sam Dickinson, Zane Parekh. It's been a conversation in the Sens sphere since we knew it was 7th, and then the Memorial Cup, they go head-to-head in the OHL finals as well. How much did the playoff series and then them meeting for those 2 games, but the tournaments in general, impact your thoughts on those 2 against each other? Or was your mind already made up from what you've seen the last couple seasons?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. To a certain extent, I've been team Sam Dickinson pretty much all season long. He's been my top-rated player from the OHL right from the get-go. And he had a really strong showing for London in the OHL playoffs, helping them capture the championship. Obviously, what Parekh did this year was extremely memorable. It's something that we haven't seen. What he did as a rookie last year, we haven't seen. Something that he did this year is something that we rarely see from draft-eligible defenders. I mean, he was the CHL's top defender for a reason, right? And he had a really strong Memorial Cup after he healed up, because I don't think his OHL playoffs were terrific, but he was very, very banged up. That was extremely obvious to anybody who watched Saginaw in the OHL playoffs. So I think he had an opportunity to heal a little bit, and we saw the more real version of Zane in the Memorial Cup. So I think that I'm still very much team Sam Dickinson, and that hasn't really changed all year, regardless of whether you take into account either of their playoff performances.
Now, at pick 7, Ross and I each have a crop of guys where no matter how things shake out, we're like...
It's a farm, Pilsy.
Yeah, true. That's a better way to describe it. It's a full, massive farm of players where if this guy lands to the Sens, we're happy. And no matter how the first 6 picks go, we feel like there's a handful of guys that can still be massive hits for the Sens at 7. Brock, give me 3 players that if the Sens have an opportunity to draft them at 7, it's an A+ pick.
Yeah, I'm going to start with Dickinson. I've seen him mocked to the Sens. We have him mocked to the Sens. I think that's just a pick that is a good one, and it makes sense. And I like it because I think Dickinson is just a really safe bet to be a minute-eating top 4 defender, somebody who can play both ends. The skating is going to play at the NHL level. It's already really, really good. It's only can continue to get better. I think he adds an element to the Sens blue line that I'm not going to say is lacking, but could use a little bit more polish. And I think that he's somebody that can really help this team reach that next level, because he's somebody that like I said, I see being almost a slam dunk top 4 defender. Do I think he's a slam dunk to be, a number 1 or a number 2 guy? No, I don't think so. I think that there's a chance that the skill and creativity just isn't good enough for him to be, the Alex Pietrangelo type that some people have compared him to, right? There's a chance that he's more of that like solid number 3, 4, Brady Shea, Darnell Nurse. Well, I don't know if we want to compare him to Darnell after the tough playoffs that he's had and that salary that people keep talking about. Yeah. But in that mold, somebody who is going to look really good on Ottawa's second pairing. So that's why I really like him for Ottawa. Another guy is Zeke William. I think that could be a pick that makes a lot of sense for similar reasons. I think that he's somebody that could help take some pressure off of Thomas Chabot, who I think could maybe be a really good pairing partner for Jake Sanderson. I think that he is somebody that could really elevate Ottawa's transition game, and he's a really high-end power play quarterback potentially as well. So a little bit slightly different element than Sam, but I think another guy that I really like because of the high-end hockey sense. I think he's going to play. And I think he's definitely somebody that's going to be in that range for sure. We've got him mocked to Utah at 6. I think based on what we've heard and what I've read as well, Utah does seem to like William. Number 3, I think best case scenario, you've got to look at somebody falling, right? Teams are scared of Caden Lindstrom's back injury. Teams are weary of Ivan Demidov in terms of the dreaded Russian factor, right? I think best case scenario, it's somebody like that falls to them. One of those high-end forwards that falls to Ottawa at 7. Because I think if you can add a guy like Lidstrom, I think that would be huge because he's somebody who plays that power game, who's going to really help to bring out the best in a guy like Tim Stützle, right? Especially on the power play. And I think that definitely would be best case scenario.